Hi there, my friends. My name is Jack, and today I'm going to be talking to you about my biggest inspiration and personal fashion hero. This is, in my own words, Hedi Slimane. Thank you so much for being here. Again, my name is Jack, and I'm just a kid from Indiana who cares a lot about fashion. I've worked a couple fashion-related jobs, and since my interest in fashion started about 7 years ago, I have just tried to soak up as much information as possible and learn about as many facets of fashion as I can. This is why this series is called In My Own Words, because I am not qualified in any way, shape, or form to talk about any of this, but it's something that I'm very passionate about and that I wanted to share with all of you guys. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my personal fashion journey, how I arrived at the world of Hedi Slimane, and why I think it's so interesting and why it is now something that I emulate very much in the way that I dress every day. My personal fashion journey has been long and quite frankly kind of rough. I started out as a 2016 Supreme fiend, and then from there I only owned Yeezy footwear for a while, and then I went to this kind of brunch core that so many people make fun of and has been the subject of a lot of memes, although that is kind of like a direct pipeline to the Hedi Slimane aesthetic that I now personally emulate so much. But I feel that at long last, nearing the age of 22, I have kind of finally figured out what I feel good wearing. And I feel that that is the end of the personal style journey. Although it can still change from there, the end goal was always for me wearing what I felt good in and not caring about what anyone thought when I wore these things that made me feel comfortable. I gravitated to Slimane's designs both because they are the right amount of subversive and they are unique, but still able to be an entire wardrobe and still able to be worn across many kinds of events and across many kinds of dress codes. I do own a lot of things outside of the Slimane universe still, although because a lot of this stuff is somehow becoming cheaper on Grailed, I doubt that will last very long, and I am soon just going to be kind of the all-encompassing Hedi Slimane fanboy. The concept that really brought me into Slimane's world and helped me buy in as heavily as I have is the concept of the Hedi Slimane uniform that a lot of people call it. Something that is a really easy blueprint to follow, but is still a very recognizable look and aesthetic that is easy to follow, but still customizable in any number of ways. Especially working these fashion-related jobs in the kind of mid and high-end tiers of retail and fashion retail, the uniform, so to speak, of a polo or a dress shirt, like a button-down, DO2s, and Wyatt boots was the easiest thing in the world to just throw on and always look the part while working these jobs. So that's really kind of how I got started in this kind of look and what helped me learn about this blueprint and really kind of run with it. So what is especially interesting about it to me, beyond this kind of blueprint that I talked about, is this look can kind of be achieved with $50 of thrifted clothing or $10,000 worth of Saint Laurent. So that kind of universalness and the fact that both of those outfits can be looked at by someone who is fashion-minded and someone who is not fashion-minded, and you're still able to make that connection, is something that I think is difficult to achieve, and that Hedi did a wonderful job of kind of bridging the gap towards. And it just shows his prevalence in all tiers of the industry. I could go on a giant tangent about the fashion trickle-down theory now, but I think I'm going to save that for another video. So I think that just shows the long-lasting and prevalent impact that Hedi Slimane has had, all the way from Karl Lagerfeld losing over 100 pounds to fit into his clothing, all the way down to that kind of thrifted style that I talked about that is very much achievable on a low budget. Continuing on the path of this influence, the fact that Slimane has kids in these sweaty underground punk nightclubs wearing his clothing is really one of the most fascinating parts of his legacy to me. For instance, in the photography books that he puts together, the anthology of a decade books that are now far too expensive for me to ever own, which is really annoying, those are filled to the brim with all kinds of aesthetics and what I view as Slimane living vicariously through the people that he styles and takes pictures of. A lot of those pictures are people in surprisingly America and even the UK and Paris as well. Young people in these kind of underground punk nightclubs that are wearing some of his most coveted pieces has always been a very interesting facet of his universe to me, because it shows that the curation of these images and the curation of these situations is very important to Slimane, and it's about the way that he wants you to live, while his designs are merely an accessory to this way that you live, but it creates this complete being and this complete situation and this complete life that you find yourself in. And that situation and that life, I think, is something that I personally strive to live and something that is very personally interesting for me. So that kind of really helped me buy into this universe that Slimane has kind of created. And the fact that he, I think, wants to live vicariously through these people that he's styling. Granted, I'm sure Hedi got out plenty during the height of his career, and I'm sure he still does. But it's kind of this curation of this life that he wants you to live within his clothing is something that I don't blame a lot of people for buying into, and that I personally have hopelessly bought in on. Something else that I like about the kind of Slimane universe, as I guess I'm calling it now, is the pseudo-elusiveness of Hedi. He's kind of like a more accessible Margiela in this way, I think, where he still has done a lot of interviews where you can learn about his ethos and his world, but then he also only posts just random pictures, seemingly, on his Instagram with little to no captions. So he is just the right amount of accessible, I think, that really helps you go off the deep end into his world. Speaking of these photos, the fact that Slimane is categorized as a French photographer on Google is also something very interesting to me. The photography has always been there in his fashion career. It was there before, and it's here still after and during his kind of what I view as his last couple years at Celine, maybe. I suppose with the way his online presence is, this makes sense, given that, again, like I mentioned, his Instagram is mostly just photos, and he has all these anthology of a decade photo books and photo books outside of that series as well that he releases as part of his campaigns. So I think this kind of curated online presence, it makes sense that he's categorized as a photographer, but I hate to kind of discredit all of his contributions to fashion and the way that he has shaped many people's entire fashion careers and shaped his career and his legacy and created all of these kind of brands that come after as a direct inspiration to him, like the 6-week residency brands and the Fix brand and all of these kinds of, I think it's like some of these other ones that I follow, a lot of these British inspired brands that are direct homages, I feel, to him and the continuations of these styles that he has created and perfected during his tenures at these brands. I suppose I can't make this video without addressing the perfectly valid and well thought out criticisms of Hedi and his kind of world. So obviously the clothing that he makes is targeted at skinny people, and his models and his cuts really reflect that. Hence, Karl Lagerfeld's story that I mentioned earlier. Lots of people argue that Hedi creates a kind of unachievable body type and has in turn given a lot of people health problems and eating disorders trying to achieve this body type that he so much covets and shows off in his runway shows. This is absolutely plausible and a perfectly valid criticism, and fashion does have a long way to go in terms of being accessible at both the top end and the bottom end. That being said, I don't blame Slimane for making clothes that fit him and are flattering to his body type and that he personally likes to wear, because in all of the photos of him, he wears things personally that are very much the embodiment of the style that he has created. So I don't blame him for doing that, and I'm honestly more surprised that more designers don't do that. Granted, a lot of fashion can be seen more as art exhibitions, especially within runway shows, and that is a very necessary part of fashion. However, I really like this concept that he has, that you could copy and paste looks from his runway shows onto the street and it never misses a beat. Another criticism that a lot of people have is that he does the same thing everywhere he goes. His early days at Dior, and then Saint Laurent, and then Celine, and even his time at Yves Saint Laurent before he rebranded the house before his time at, sorry, I stumbled over my words there, even before his time at Dior. I actually 100% agree with this criticism, and I think that that's one of the things that attracted me so much to him and his universe in the beginning, is that he found what he's good at and he ran all the way with it, and he just went all in on it and tried to perfect it as much as humanly possible. It's his trademark aesthetic, and if I were him, I would want to do the exact same thing too, because this is kind of what has made your career. So you just want to perfect it as much as humanly possible and create the perfect world in which you and your fans can live in. Granted, I think Celine has been more of a kind of playground for him where he's exploring a little bit outside of his comfort zone, but that work is still very much recognizable and is still very much flowing with this DNA that he has created and done his best to perfect in the last 20 years in the industry. So that is, in my own words, Hedi Slimane. Please keep in mind, these are all my own original thoughts, and I am in no way qualified to speak on a lot of this. It's just something that I personally very much enjoy and wanted to give my thoughts about, and hence the in my own words. So thank you for sticking with me this long, and I hope to have some more types of videos like this coming up soon. But I cannot express to you how much I appreciate you taking the time to listen to me and hear what I have to say. So I really appreciate that. Feel free to rip on me in the comments and tell me how dumb I am, and any other thoughts that you have. So again, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. And that has been, in my own words, Hedi Slimane.